What I actually want to do this morning is chat to you about your favourite sports documentaries. Having been in one now, having the expert view of being on both sides of the camera lens for sports documentaries, we might go through perhaps your top 5 favourite sports documentaries. Is that something you're up for?
Yeah, no bother.
Oh, look, we have a pre-prepared list in front of us.
Oh, yeah, we've done a bit of...
Oh, there it goes.
We've done a bit
the
of
list. I have a spare list here. Oh,
no, I haven't. I have the list. Yeah, look, sports documentaries, I've been on, Laochra Gael. It's an absolute honour to be on it. When I was asked, I was flattered and delighted to do it. And I believe it's a good enough show. We watched it in the Greyhound Bar last Sunday night, and there was a big crowd there. So you weren't the only one to get a little peek preview. I'm going to start number 5. The Bad Boys, ESPN, obviously, they're the king of documentaries and sports documentaries, especially the sport I love most, which is basketball. So, The Bad Boys, about the Pistons in the late 80s and 90s. They were the mean team. They had Bill Laimbeer, big 6'11" white guy, used to go around. If he was playing the NBA now, he'd be suspended. He wouldn't play 6 games a season because he'd be probably in jail for some of the stuff he did in the basketball court. So they had the famous Jordan rules when Jordan was trying to break through the break into the team, break into winning an NBA championship. These boys had a thing called the Jordan rules, and the Jordan rules were anybody that came near the basket was absolutely killed, especially Michael Jordan.
So Isaiah Thomas there in the picture there. What a player.
They had Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars. They had loads of skills, and they won 2 championships in an era where the Celtics and the Lakers were really dominant. So they were a brilliant team. They had Dumars and Isaiah Thomas in the backcourt. Fascinating relationship between the two of them.
And Rodman.
Look, Dennis Rodman was who I modelled a lot of my game on, and who I probably still play most like, because I could get 20 rebounds and no points. So I think Dennis Rodman is the player to have the most rebounds and no points. He's 5 games, 1 game he had 28 rebounds and no points.
Is he an underrated facet of the Bulls?
Hugely.
Yeah.
And I think real basketball people and real people with knowledge of the game, Rodman's never underestimated. Rodman was the best defender. Rodman used to pick up all the best guys, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and he'd take them out of the game. He was called the Worm because he was able to get inside your head. He was physical, he was in your face. You're talking about shithousery that we talked about last week on Shot Clock. Dennis Rodman would be up there with the kings of shithousery. A very quiet guy in his Pistons day. He had the black hair. He was really inside himself. He got Defensive Player of the Year. He couldn't make his speech because he was crying so much during it. He actually couldn't get the words out about how proud it was that he was the best defender in the NBA. A very intriguing character. And they had Bill Laimbeer, as I said, who was a hatchet man but could step out and shoot the 3 and extend the floor. They had Mark Aguirre, who from the west side of Chicago, that we'll talk about later on, as well as Isaiah Thomas, both from the west side of Chicago. Both went to Detroit and actually had a lot of people in Chicago during them times cheering for the Pistons because of their allegiance to them. So a really good documentary. It goes through the rise and the fall, how they got to the top and what started to break it down, and characters within the team and the way they've done it and the settings they use is a really great documentary. So
Fantastic.
I'd urge you to check that out. Number 4 on my list is Unguarded.
I haven't seen this one.
Yeah, look, go home and watch it tonight and give me a text later on. About Chris Heron. From Fall River, Massachusetts, a tough area in Boston. White guy, 6'4", could shoot, could really play, went to Fresno State University, had huge kind of pull drawbacks to troubles in Boston. In the area he was from, drugs was a huge part of it. He had huge addiction problems. He went to Fresno State and would get away from it, but then people would come out from Boston and would bring him drugs, and when he'd come back in the off-season, he'd get back involved in it again, and he had a constant battle. And there was huge hope and prayers that he'd get drafted into the NBA, and where would he get drafted? And, his family and a lot of his close friends were saying, as far away from Boston as possible, this guy can get drafted, and he might be able to turn his life around, and because he'll get away from all the people he knows, the circles he knows in relation to the drugs. Gets selected by the Boston Celtics, which in a sick way was so sad, because it should have been a dream for this kid from Boston to represent the Celtics. He loved the Celtics, coming off the back of Larry Bird and that team. He could have been the next White Hope. He was brilliant. He was a really good player, but it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. He's standing outside in the parking lot 15 minutes before a game waiting to get these uppers and downers, these drugs he was on. He couldn't function without them. the national anthem's going on inside in the hall. Chris Heron, the rookie point guard, is out the back waiting to meet some guy and do a deal with him and get back in. He ends up over in Italy. He's got a family. Ends up going away, getting I think a heroin out there in Italy, and falling asleep at the wheel and crashing his car. And his wife went through a really tough time, but he's turned his life around, and he's now an advocate and a speaker and goes around and does talks. But a brilliant documentary. One of these ones that is just so hard hitting. You don't want to like it, but you end up loving it because it's just so enthralling. But a one that's hard to watch a few times, because you'll watch the start of it when you see this kid, and this fresh-faced kid, and how good he is and how much potential he has. And at stages during this documentary, this guy is at the bottom of the bottom. And really good show. Number 3 is about the great Len Bias. It chronicles the death of this guy who they said was going to be as good as Jordan.
This is like the first amazing 30 for 30. I know it's only like episode 3 or 4, but when 30 for 30 brought this documentary out, everybody was like, this is a series of documentaries that has something a little bit different about it. Like I think probably Bill Simmons would be the first person to admit that it's like stories like this that helped make this series what it was, and this is just a fantastic watch. So for anybody who doesn't know what happens with Len Bias?
Len Bias is like, just an unbelievable high school and college player, again from really tough areas of Chicago. Was an absolute superstar in Maryland University, and was 6'7", could shoot the ball, had the high flying, could dunk. Literally, if Jordan had just came into the league, I think in '84. This guy was like, literally, they were saying this guy's as good as Jordan. He's going to be, because Jordan's star, we'll say in '86, even though it was incredibly high, and he'd gotten 63 points against the famous Boston Celtics that year, nobody was saying at that stage Jordan is the best player in the world or anything like that. It was obviously as his career went on, but they were saying this guy is as good as Jordan when he was coming out. It's a harrowing one. It's really tough, but it basically documents his life and his profile as he rises through the ranks of college basketball, high school to college basketball. And he
dies of an overdose.
Cocaine overdose, and I don't think he'd ever taken it before. And obviously, I don't know what went on that night, or was his body not able for it, or was his heart not able for it, or whatever. But to die of an overdose, and I think the most harrowing thing in the documentary is his father, who had got his son from these areas of Chicago that we'll talk about a little sooner in my number 1 documentary, but. When you get him to the NBA draft night, he's selected by the Boston Celtics in '86, who've just won the World Championship with Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. You ask even how they got the number 1 draft that year. That's the way it was going. It's insane. And they were going to launch this Len Bias character in the top of the squad. Like they would.
But also what it meant to his family. Like this was like, I know it means anybody who gets a professional contract.
But like for his family in Chicago, it means they're out of Chicago. Yeah. It's their way out. It's the only way out in these parts. And contract signed, and you're going to be a Boston Celtic. Red Auerbach was absolutely delighted. It took him a year earlier. He was going to be able to play, and unfortunately for him, that fateful night, things went bad, and he ended up dying, which is a really tough one. So that's an unbelievable documentary in my eyes. And number 2, Sky Sports, The Miracle of Medina. What can we say about
pretty
that
good content to work with?
Absolutely, yeah. It had everything. It had obviously looked at Severiano Ballesteros, Jose Maria, their relationship. Sevi had passed away. Jose was convinced he was looking down on him.
Sevi gave Ian Poulter.
He gave him some kind of powers, yeah. And the golf, like the Ryder Cup always brings me to a standstill, but I think it brings most sports fans and obviously golf fans to a standstill when it's on. It's just intriguing, and it's getting more intriguing as the year goes on. You've got the Americans now. You've got Bubba whipping up the crowd before he hits a tee shot, and you've Poulter following him up now. It's become more than golf. It's turning into a kind of a huge, just ginormous sporting event, and that the golf that we saw on that day, and in particular from Poulter, endeared him to me forever, and just the way he he literally refused to lose, and himself and McIlroy, he's playing with the best player in the world at the time, and he just hauls him over the line. He birdies the last 5 holes, and it's a really good one.
Right, number one. I'm interested in this because we've all seen it, but you've got a kind of a fresh angle on this.
Yeah, number one is obviously, look, it's the first of its kind, and it's why it's my all-time favourite documentary. It's why I had the video, rented the video, and went back to the video store and tried to rent another movie, and they said, hey, you still got Hoop Dreams, and I lost it. It's just vanished. The dog ate it or something, but it wasn't going back to the video store. I had to open up a new account somewhere else. But yeah, Hoop Dreams is my all-time favourite. It's a documentary that was made over 9 years that covers the life of 2 players in particular, Arthur Agee and William Gates. And, you know, these guys are from, as I said, the west side of Chicago. The death rate through gun violence is the highest in the world in this area. So, you know, there's a person shot every 29 seconds or something. It's crazy what happens over there. And or there's a gunshot fired every 29 seconds over there. So, you know, these 2 guys, it followed them all the way through. It followed Agee as he went through to Marshall High School. And, you know, it's a 2.5-hour documentary on these 2 kids that are literally, as I said earlier on, their dream is to get out of this area of Chicago and try and make the NBA. And they've got guys that they're following at the time, the likes of Isaiah Thomas, the likes of Mark Aguirre, that came from these area and now are on multi-million-dollar contracts, playing in the NBA, on TV all the time, huge names. And these guys, you know, and have nothing else going on in their day but to play basketball on the streets. And it follows them from the streets, it follows them into their home, it follows their family story. Arthur's father, Arthur Bo Agee, was a troubled character who was addicted to crack cocaine, came in and out of the documentary, was in and out of the house. It really brought you inside these people's homes. You got to follow these kids for 6 or 7 years. So incredible work. What was looking to be a 30-minute documentary ended up being a 2.5-hour movie.
It's one of the best films relating to sport ever, regardless of factual or non-factual. Definitely in terms of documentaries, I would have it in my top 2 or 3.
Absolutely, yeah. And it went all over the world, and these guys know that now. Like, you know, when I was doing my bit of research for this, I went back and looked, and these guys are talking now. And I went to Australia, and whenever I mention my name over in Australian basketball circles, people know it. Japan, all over the world, you know, these 2 characters were known, and they never made it to the NBA. But their story and how they went, and actually a coach of mine, Russ Bradford, he wanted me to go to college when I was 20, and he paid for flights over to Chicago, and I had a few trials in Chicago and down in New Mexico. And a guy that Russ brought to New Mexico was a guy called Sean Harrington, an incredible basketball player, an incredible person, and came back to the toughest side of Chicago to coach in this Marshall High School where Arthur Agee went, because he also went there. And Sean Harrington has a little cameo coming down the bus in Hoop Dreams. He's got a fly Adidas kind of shell suit at the time were a big thing. You might remember Paul Gascoigne used to wear him. But he comes down the bus kind of fist pumping, and he was coaching at Marshall High School for years, doing a great job there. His car was stolen one time. He went and got a replacement off the rental car company, was driving his daughter to school, pulled up on Chicago's west side on the way to the school, and noticed 2 guys walking, looking back with hoods on and staring at the car, and, you know, went on to the next set of lights. They were there again. The guys turned around, opened up 15 shots, bullet shots at him and his daughter in the car. So incredibly, he saw it kind of unfold. He said he got about a second notice where he saw them reaching for the gun, and as he did that, he clicked his seatbelt and he dived across his daughter in the car, and as the bullet sprayed through the car, he saved his daughter's life. But one of them, he got a few clips here and there, but one of them pierced his back and put him in a wheelchair for life. And he's now back there coaching in a wheelchair. And when I was out in Chicago, I went to a guy called Brian Bracey and Chris Bracey. Chris had just won the league with me here with the Tralee Tigers, and his brother Brian had got drafted by the Bulls in the NBA and had played all over big leagues in Europe. And the boys' job for the 3 weeks was to get me ready for the trials, so to bring me to, you know, good runs, they call them in America, so good games. So they told me some side, he said, look, we're going to go for a drive today and you're going to maybe feel a bit intimidated at times, but don't worry. Like, Brian was known, he was drafted, obviously in the NBA, he was driving a big Yukon Denali truck with speakers, nearly as tall as myself coming out the back, and we were boom, boom, down these streets. But when we were in the street, I started slinking down in the car because I write about it in my book. It was probably as scared as I've ever been. The lads went to the shop at one stage and I said, no, I don't want to go into the shop. And as they were in there, I started panicking when I'm in this car by myself.
Yeah.
No, the windows were all tinted. But like I'm talking about guys standing on the streets, hoods up, brown paper bags, drinking their liquor, looking really intimidating. We came to the gym. The gym was upstairs above a church. We walked up this old steel stairs. I don't know why to this day. I think Brian was giving a kid $50 to look after the Jeep at the bottom of the stairs. Said, if anybody touches the Jeep, you come up and get me. And the kid was like delighted with $50, huge money to him. And I was going up the stairs. So I was looking back. They were doing this deal with the kid to look after the car. And I went up, inexplicably opened the door to the gym. The gym door creaks up, and in I go. And like, there's 40 black guys and all, they're bouncing. The main guy coming down the court, he just puts the ball under his arm and looks at me as if to go, where are you going? Like, it was the biggest Billy Hoyle, white man can't jump story of all time.
How do you get on inside there?
We had a good 5. It was me and the 2 lads, and we picked up 2 other guys, and we used to wait your game, and it's games to 21 or 15 minutes, so it's kind of timed, and there was a huge crowd in there, and it didn't start great for me. There was this guy called the Mayor, they called him. He was like 41 at the time, but he was like just an unbelievable, like Steph Curry like shooter. Like he's been in this gym his whole life. He's just shooting. And I gotten Defensive Player of the Year in Ireland, so Chris was like, you mark him. So I marked him the first few times down the court. Your man's bullying me, he's bashing. I put my forearm on him, he turns around and hits my forearm. It gives me such a fright that I back up, turns around, hits a tree, and he's talking trash to all the people down the sideline. They're all laughing at me. And it's kind of getting to the point where they're like up 6 or 7-0, and I'm getting, I'm kind of looking over to Chris going, do you want to switch this matchup up? And he was backing into me at one stage, and he was hitting me hard, and when he went to hit me, I kind of got out of the way and I actually hit the ball from behind him, so he fell on his arse. Ball went out into the open floor. There was a guy in the wing. I was quick enough at the time. I was a young guy at this stage. Dribbled down left-handed, two-handed. Your man went to block me. I dunked it over him, hung onto the ring. Crowd starts going bonkers. Maybe this white boy can play a bit. And I ended up playing with the boys. We were balling. I was getting dunks, alley-oops. The rims were a small bit low when I say alley-oops. I wouldn't have been a great man to catch alley-oop. And I'd say probably the only place I ever caught alley-oop, and I caught 2 of them, was in the gym that day. Probably easy for me to say, nobody can prove otherwise, but maybe Chris Bracey, we can have him on sometime.
Yeah,
he can prove it. But yeah, came out, and the Mayor came up to me afterwards, and we were after beating his team. He'd won like 3 or 4 games previous to that, and we beat them. We played for like 2 hours. He came back on with another team. We beat them again. He kept coming at me. I kept going at him. I was getting confident and cocky for some reason over there, because I was starting to play. I was catching dunks. I could tell the crowd had turned from laughing at me to kind of cheering me on.
You had gained their respect.
Yeah, and I gained his respect, and that was the best thing. As I was leaving the hall, and I actually left. He came up to me and shook my hand, and he was like, something like white chocolate, hey white chocolate, what's up? That'd be a big compliment. And he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm trying out for a few colleges. And he was like, yeah, you'll be fine. So I came down the stairs, I was literally buzzing. I wrote in the book that we were driving back down in the Jeep, and I opened up the sunroof, and I was like roaring out the window of the sunroof. I was like, bring on the college guys. If I can get through Holy City and the west side of Chicago playing street ball against the Mayor and his crews, I'm going to be okay. So, when I was going through there, like, I knew that this is the area a lot of Hoop Dreams was filmed in a lot of the areas. So it was really, as scared as I was looking at everything. I was looking at the streets, I was looking at the corners, and it really brought me back to that Hoop Dreams documentary. And I was on my own dream of trying to get to maybe college or see the light. So yeah, it was...
Playing in front of the hill is nothing in comparison to that.
No, it really wasn't. Playing in front of the hill was fine compared to being generally worried about your life, yeah. And as I said, when I walked in and they all stopped, I didn't just stop at the door. So I turned around and started walking down the court. There's all guys sitting. There's guys stopped playing. There's about 20 fellas sitting on this kind of it was like an old school gym, so where they'd have the plays.
Yeah.
The stage, there was a big crowd on the stage, the scoreboard and the time clock was up there. And I was walking and I just looked over my shoulder twice, and the Bracey brothers hadn't come in yet, and eventually they came in and they got a bit of love from a few of the guys.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, thanks be to God.
I'm with these.
Yeah, I'm with these, yeah. So and they probably knew straight away when Brian came in that, okay, this guy is obviously not just kind of landed from Ireland kind of going, I'm going to play.
Do you ever regret not seeing the American dream through?
I can't say I regret it because of how lucky I was in my sporting life here in Ireland, but I would have loved to have played basketball at that stage. If I did sign for a college, I would have loved to have played for whatever, 23, 24 hours a week, and I would have loved them to work on my jump shot, to get me in a gym. They were ahead of us at that time. Like, this was 2002, you know, so 2003. So this was 02, 03 maybe, and they were so far ahead on strength and conditioning at that stage that I would have loved to given myself the chance to see where my basketball ability could have got to. And maybe looking back, I stayed for an under-21 tilt of an All-Ireland with Kerry, and I maybe regret not going for a year and doing the college for a year. Just
that might have benefited your football down the line as well.
I think I've no doubt it would have. I would have come back. There would have been no kind of, do your weights on a Tuesday and Thursday. This would have been weights every day, and this would have been me coming back, you know, a bit more of an animal almost, a different animal from a year over in the States. So I can't say I regret it, but I would have loved the life of a college basketball athlete, I think. Maybe not the school part, but definitely the playing every day and the games and the atmospheres and being a bit of an underdog all the time would have suited me.
Your Laochra Gael is out next Thursday. We don't really have any time to chat about it. It is worth checking out, I can assure you. Just one thing I wanted to ask you about. There's a scene in it where you're talking about winning Footballer of the Year in 2006, and you're saying you're there alongside Henry Shefflin winning Hurler of the Year, and you say that there's no way I'm actual Footballer of the Year. I might have been the most on-form Footballer of the Year. And at the same time, they're kind of knitting through some of the scores you got that year, some of the big booming points, even in 06, some of the top corner finishes in 06. And I wonder if you ever think that you were a bit harsh on yourself in terms of that appraisal of your year in 06.
Look, I can't say how, I can only say how I felt, and that's what I said in the documentary, is that I was sitting there next to Henry Shefflin, we're after winning a car for Player of the Year, and I just wanted to get out of the way of I was standing next to Henry Shefflin, who what I say in the documentary, I think he is a hurler of the year. You know, he is the best hurler in the country, whereas I don't think I was the best footballer in the country. I know I wasn't the best footballer in the country, but what I said was I was maybe the most influential that 4 games, and it just felt it didn't sit well with me that I was standing in pictures next to Henry Shefflin. I was a bit look, I know my standing, and I know, look, yes, things went well for me that year, and I did take my chances well and all that, but
it wasn't just like some sort of random influence, some big fella who caught the ball and then laid it off all the time. Like, you were scoring, you were finishing, you were like...
Yeah, I could kick with my right leg. Like, I had a decent right leg. Like, you know, I had no left leg. With no dummy solos or no anything like that. I could catch and I could kick from certain areas with my right leg. But
like the goal against Armagh, for example, when you were in the keeper's face. Like, I mean, that's an unbelievable score. Like, that is like a top class footballer.
I don't know what came over me for that. You know, that wasn't really. You know, maybe it was just the confidence or something, and I don't know, because I didn't have confidence that day because Francie was actually beating me for a long part of that first half. But yeah, to catch the ball with my back to goal, it would be very not like me to do a shimmy and take on my man. The only thing I was saying to him was he was on a yellow. He just picked up a yellow at the start of the second half, and that's the only reason was probably going on in my head to take this guy on. And the goal obviously was a huge pivotal moment in that game, and a huge pivotal moment in my career, really, I would say. And even, you know, even though my uncle made me apologise and I was gutted after it, and I said in my book it was my biggest mistake ever apologising, but it was, you know, that even that bit of me roaring back at Paul Hearty, you know, that was me not kind of backing down for Kerry and standing up to the Armagh onslaught, because they would give it to you verbally and physically, and I had got it for a lot of that game. And you know, that was. I think Jack wrote in his book that he kind of jumped up and let out a yahoo, as he'd call it, because that was us kind of saying, no, lads, not today. We're taking this one today.